What was it like on the set of Little House on the Prairie? The actress who played Michael Landon's wife says it wasn't as wholesome as it seemed.
Guess what me and Andrew found?
Where have you been, young lady? You're late.
Huh?
I asked you where you've been.
Well, I was trying to tell you, me and Andrew.
That is, you're late.
A grown man is thrown from a moving train. He should be a person. Instead, for one unmistakable second, he is a mannequin, arms stiff, body weightless, landing in the grass like a sack of flour dropped from a truck. Nobody caught it. Nobody cut it. It aired, and it has stayed on tape for nearly 50 years, waiting for someone to actually look. That is the strange gift of watching old television with modern eyes. Little House on the Prairie was never meant to be studied frame by frame. It was meant to be felt, a Sunday night ritual of butter churns and one-room schoolhouses, of Pa Ingalls solving every crisis with a hug and a fiddle tune. But somewhere between the warmth and the wholesome music cues, the show left behind a trail of small human mistakes, the kind that happen when a crew is shooting 8 seasons of episodic television on a tight schedule with a limited budget. Look again, and the cracks in the illusion start to show. The train sequence comes from a season 5 episode titled The Odyssey, and it remains one of the most talked about bloopers in the show's history. In the scene, a mysterious assailant attempts to throw Albert Ingalls from a moving train, a moment built for tension and dread. But the production, working with the technology and safety standards of the mid-1970s, made a choice that modern viewers can spot instantly. Rather than risk a stunt performer on a genuinely moving train car, the crew substituted a dummy for the actual fall, and the dummy is not subtle. It hits the ground with none of the loose, reactive motion of a human body. Meanwhile, viewers can catch the real stunt performer rolling down the embankment separately, technically part of the same sequence but visibly disconnected from the falling prop. It is the kind of moment that would be smoothed over with digital effects today. In 1974, it simply had to be good enough, and it aired exactly as filmed. That single unedited scene opens the door to a much larger pattern once you start paying attention. Little House on the Prairie ran for 8 seasons plus a follow-up run called Little House, A New Beginning, more than 200 episodes shot between 1974 and 1983 under constant time pressure. Continuity, in that environment, was often the first casualty. Take the now famous case of Laura Ingalls' pregnancy. According to Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura for the entirety of the original series, and according to Lenny Parker, who has run a dedicated Little House fan site for years, Laura appears pregnant for what amounts to well over a year of in-show time. She announces her pregnancy during a warm weather episode, and by the following summer's episodes, she is still visibly expecting, an obstetric impossibility that nobody on the production seems to have caught, or perhaps nobody cared to fix, since audiences at home were unlikely to track seasonal continuity that closely. Then there is the matter of Colonel Sanders. In a Season 8 episode called Wave of the Future, Nellie Olson's restaurant is franchised out from under her, and in a plot twist that still baffles fans, the real historical figure Colonel Harlan Sanders appears to offer a chicken franchise deal. It plays as a charming bit of Americana until you remember the math. The show is set in the 1870s and 1880s. Colonel Sanders was not born until 1890, and Kentucky Fried Chicken as a company did not exist until 1952. The writers folded a 20th century fast food icon into a 19th century prairie town, and the show simply moved on as though nothing were wrong. Wardrobe tells its own quiet story of a production working faster than its research department could keep up. Caroline Ingalls, played by Karen Grassel, is visible in several episodes wearing what appears to be a modern bra beneath her prairie dress, an undergarment that historically was not invented until 1912, decades after the show's setting. Hairstyles slip in the same direction. Several of the female characters wear soft, bouncy curls that read as distinctly 1970s perm work, rather than anything a frontier woman would have styled by hand. Melissa Gilbert herself has openly acknowledged in interviews and in her memoir that her hair was often too long and too contemporary for the period the show was supposedly depicting. These were not secrets kept from the audience. They were simply accepted trade-offs, the price of shooting a weekly series fast enough to keep NBC's schedule fed. Props recur in ways that reveal just how resourceful, or how limited, the production budget really was. Eagle-eyed fans have tracked a particular quilt, mostly white with a pattern resembling a double wedding ring design, as it travels from the Olsen family's bed to the bed of Charles Ingalls' own parents, and then onto other characters' beds entirely across different episodes. It is a small detail, easy to miss on a single viewing, but unmistakable once you start rewatching with intention. The same goes for a set of noisy tree branches that can be heard rustling outside the girl's bedroom window in at least 2 separate episodes, the monster of Walnut Grove, and the music box, despite there being no tree anywhere near that side of the house in any other scene of the series. It is almost certainly stock sound effect work, laid in during post-production to add atmosphere, but it creates a small ongoing inconsistency for anyone watching closely. Perhaps the strangest inconsistency involves the character Albert Ingalls and his ultimate fate. In the television movie that closed out the original storyline, the narrative strongly implies that Albert dies. Yet in a separate later episode, he is referenced as having grown up to become the town doctor of Walnut Grove, alive and well. This contradiction bothered fans for decades, enough that one Reddit user on the show's dedicated subreddit brought it up so often to her boyfriend that he arranged, as an anniversary gift, for Melissa Gilbert to record a personalized video addressing the confusion directly. Gilbert's answer, delivered with clear humor, was that Albert did die in the movie, but returned to Walnut Grove afterward as a zombie, an undead doctor quietly practicing medicine on the prairie. It was a joke, but it was also the closest thing fans ever got to an official explanation for one of the show's more glaring narrative gaps. Time itself becomes slippery by the series finale. The concluding television movie, The Last Farewell, is set in 1901, more than a decade after the events of the final regular season. Historically, that timeline lines up with tragedy, since the real Charles Ingalls, the man Laura Ingalls Wilder based her father on, died in 1902, just a year after the story's setting. But on screen, none of the adult characters appear to have aged into their 60s, and the children who filled out the later seasons, characters like Carrie, Nancy, and James, show no signs of having grown into adulthood either. Laura's own voiceover narration in the Season 9 premiere places the story in the spring of 1887, a full 14 years before The Last Farewell, yet the show behaves as though only a couple of years have passed for its characters. Time, on Walnut Grove, apparently moved however the script needed it to. None of this diminishes what the show accomplished, and in some ways it makes the achievement more human. Little House on the Prairie was produced at a breakneck pace by a crew that, according to Melissa Gilbert's own memoir, Prairie Tale, was working under intense demands, sometimes shooting in extreme heat, sometimes managing personal struggles behind the scenes that never made it into the finished episodes. The mistakes that slipped through, the dummy on the train tracks, the anachronistic Colonel Sanders cameo, the modern bra beneath a pioneer dress, are not signs of carelessness so much as evidence of real people making real-time decisions under real constraints, with none of the safety nets that modern production offers. There was no visual effects team to erase the mannequin. There was no continuity software flagging Laura's suspiciously long pregnancy. There was only a crew, a schedule, and the next episode due on air. That is perhaps what makes rewatching these bloopers feel less like catching the show in a lie and more like meeting it honestly for the first time. The polished, golden-hued nostalgia of Little House on the Prairie was always, in part, a performance, not just by its actors but by an entire production working to create the illusion of a simpler, more coherent world. Look closely enough, and the seams show. A stunt double doesn't quite sync with his own stand-in. A restaurant owner strikes a deal with a man who wouldn't be born for another decade. A quilt wanders from bedroom to bedroom like it has a life of its own. These aren't flaws that ruin the show. They are fingerprints, small and human, left behind by the people who built something that still means something to millions of viewers, decades after it first aired. And maybe that is the real reason to look again. Not to catch the mistake, but to remember that behind every frame of that idyllic prairie, there are real people, working hard, moving fast, and doing their best to make magic out of limited time and limited resources, one imperfect take at a time.